The soft hum of the ultrasound machine filled the room as Emily Carter rested her hand on her slightly swollen belly, eager to see her baby once more. At 20 weeks pregnant, every visit brought new insights about the tiny life growing inside her. The technician's smooth movements suddenly halted, her brow furrowing as she studied the screen. "Is everything okay?" Emily's voice trembled, her maternal instincts on high alert. The technician's reassuring smile eased her fears. "Your baby's perfect, Mrs. Carter. Strong heartbeat. Good size. Let me get Dr. Harper for you." As the technician left, Emily grabbed her phone, scrolling through recent messages. 3 missed calls from Sarah, her childhood best friend, and a text that read, "Call me ASAP, it's important." But it was the email below that caught her eye. A message from her husband's assistant, accidentally sent to her personal inbox instead of her work account. The subject line read, "Hotel confirmation, downtown Hilton." Emily's finger hovered over the email. Daniel had told her he was working late on the Thompson account tonight. A voice in her head warned her not to look, that some questions were better left unanswered. But another, louder voice reminded her of the late-night calls, sudden business trips, and the growing distance between them. Like a crack in a foundation, she opened the email. The confirmation was for tonight, a corner suite with a king bed. The guest names made her blood run cold. Daniel Carter and Olivia Bennett, his new marketing director. The room seemed to spin. Emily gripped the exam table, her knuckles white against the paper covering. The baby kicked, a flutter of movement that felt like a question mark against her ribs. Dr. Harper's entrance barely registered. The older woman's warm greeting faded into background noise as Emily's mind raced to the past few months. The lingering perfume on Daniel's shirts, the way he'd stopped touching her belly during conversations, the sudden interest in late-night gym sessions. "Emily!" Dr. Harper's concerned voice broke through her spiral. "Your blood pressure's quite elevated. Is everything all right?" Emily forced a smile that felt like broken glass. "Just worry about work," she lied, the words bitter on her tongue. "Everything's fine with the baby?" The doctor launched into a detailed update, but Emily barely heard her. She nodded at appropriate intervals, clutching her phone like a lifeline. As soon as she left the medical building, she called Sarah. "I've been trying to reach you," Sarah answered on the first ring, her voice tense. "I just found out about Daniel." Emily cut her off, surprising herself with how steady she sounded. "He's with her tonight, isn't he? That's what you were trying to tell me." The silence on the other end was answer enough. "Oh, honey," Sarah's voice cracked. "I saw them together at Greenfield Park this morning. I took pictures. I wanted to tell you in person." Emily leaned against her car, the metal cool against her back. Around her, life continued its normal rhythm. People walking dogs, checking phones, living their ordinary lives while hers crumbled. "I can't go home," she whispered, pressing her free hand against her stomach. "I can't face him." "Then don't." Sarah's tone shifted from sympathetic to determined. "Pack a bag and go to Ethan's place. He's got that big house outside the city. And he's your brother. It's perfect." Emily almost laughed at the suggestion. Her older brother Ethan was many things, successful, intelligent, fiercely protective in his own distant way, but perfect wasn't one of them. They hadn't spoken properly in months, their relationship reduced to obligatory holiday calls and brief texts. The last time she'd visited his house was 2 years ago at a Christmas gathering that ended with Ethan retreating to his study, leaving the rest of the family to celebrate without him. "Ethan barely talks to anyone," Emily protested. "He's not exactly the nurturing type." "He's family," Sarah insisted, "and you need family right now. Besides," she paused, followed by the sound of keys jingling. "I'm coming with you." "What?" "Sarah, you can't just already packing a bag. I'll meet you at your place in 30 minutes. We'll get your things, and then we're driving to Ethan's. No arguments." Emily opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if seconding Sarah's decision. She thought about going home, facing Daniel, listening to his excuses and apologies. The very idea made her nauseous. "Okay," she whispered. 30 minutes. The drive home felt surreal, like moving through a dream where everything looked normal but felt wrong. Emily parked in her usual spot, took the familiar elevator up to their apartment. Inside, everything was exactly as she left it that morning. Dishes drying by the sink, Daniel's tie draped over a kitchen chair, their wedding photos smiling down from the wall. She moved through the space like a ghost, pulling clothes from drawers and hangers. Her hands shook as she packed her prenatal vitamins, the little yellow onesie she bought last week, the ultrasound photo she planned to show Daniel tonight. The sound of Sarah's key in the lock made her jump. Her friend burst in like a summer storm, all fierce energy and protective anger. One look at Emily's face, and Sarah's expression softened. "Oh, sweetie." She wrapped Emily in a tight hug, careful of her belly. "We're going to get through this. You're not alone." Emily buried her face in Sarah's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender shampoo. For the first time since reading the email, she let herself cry. Sarah held her until the sobs subsided, then gently guided her to sit on the couch. "I'll finish packing. You rest." She disappeared into the bedroom, returning moments later with Emily's half-filled suitcase. "Where's your pregnancy pillow?" "Guest room closet." Emily's voice sounded hollow to her own ears. "Sarah, what am I going to do?" Sarah paused in her efficient packing to meet Emily's eyes. "First, we're getting you somewhere safe. Then we'll figure out the rest." She hesitated. "Have you called Ethan yet?" Emily shook her head. "I can't. I don't know what to say." "I'll call him." Sarah pulled out her phone, her tone leaving no room for argument. He can be as antisocial as he wants, but he's not turning away his pregnant sister. Emily watched as Sarah dialed, her heart pounding. The relationship between her best friend and her brother had always been complicated. Sarah had grown up next door to them, and as teenagers, she and Ethan had maintained a careful distance that seemed charged with unspoken tensions. Now, years later, they barely acknowledged each other at family events. "Ethan?" Sarah's voice was professional, controlled. "It's Sarah Bennett. We need your help. Emily's coming to stay with you for a while." A pause. "No, she can't stay somewhere else. She needs her brother right now." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm coming too. We'll be there in 3 hours." She ended the call before Ethan could respond, turned to Emily with a triumphant smile. "See? All arranged." Emily managed a weak laugh. "He's going to be furious." "Let him be." Sarah zipped up the suitcase. "People need to be pushed out of their comfort zones. Now come on, we're burning daylight." As they loaded the car, Emily cast one last look at the apartment building. Somewhere in the city, Daniel was with another woman, probably believing he had all the time in the world to hide his betrayal. By the time he returned home, she would be gone. The baby kicked again, and Emily rested her hand on her stomach. "It's just us now, little one," she whispered. "But we're going to be okay." Sarah slid into the driver's seat, her face set with determination. Emily buckled her seatbelt, feeling the weight of her wedding ring against her finger. With trembling hands, she worked it free and dropped it into the cup holder. The small gold band made a hollow sound as it landed. "Ready," she said, and meant it. As they pulled away from the curb, the setting sun painted the city in shades of amber and shadow. Ahead lay 3 hours of highway, a brother's reluctant sanctuary, and uncertain future. But for now, Emily closed her eyes and focused on breathing, on the steady rhythm of her baby's movements, on the comfort of knowing that whatever came next, she wasn't facing alone. Ethan Reeves stood at his study window, watching headlights cut through the darkness as a car wound its way up his private drive. His fingers tightened around his whiskey glass, ice cubes clinking in protest. 3 hours of dreading this moment hadn't made it any easier to face. The security system chimed, announcing the gate's opening. He'd programmed it earlier against his better judgment. Now, watching the sedan approach, he questioned his decision to allow this invasion of his carefully maintained solitude. His phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from Daniel. He silenced it without reading the messages. Whatever crisis his sister was fleeing, he had no intention of becoming entangled in the drama. She could stay until she found somewhere else to go. That was the extent of his obligation. The car's headlights swept across his face as it pulled to a stop. Through the window, He watched Sarah emerge first. Her decisive movements were exactly as he remembered, even in the dim exterior lighting. She radiated that same fierce energy that had always made him uncomfortable. She hurried to the passenger side, helping Emily out with gentle care. His sister's condition was more visible than he'd expected. The sight of her rounded belly triggered memories he'd spent years burying. Their mother's last pregnancy, the complications, the funeral that followed. The doorbell rang, its sound intrusive in the quiet house. Ethan took his time walking to the door, each step measured, controlled. When he opened it, Sarah stood front and center, one arm protectively around Emily. "Your security system needs updating," Sarah said by way of greeting. The code was too easy to guess. "I changed an hour ago." Ethan met her challenging gaze. 4th of July, 1999. The day you broke your arm falling from our treehouse. Something flickered across Sarah's face. Surprise, maybe recognition. But she quickly masked it. Emily needs a rest. Which room can she use? Ethan stepped back, gesturing to the grand staircase. 2nd floor, first door on the right. It has an attached bathroom. He glanced at his sister, noting her pale face and red-rimmed eyes. "The kitchen's stocked if you're hungry." Emily moved past him without meeting his eyes, one hand cradled beneath her belly. Sarah followed with their bags, her shoulders straight and tense. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the high-ceilinged foyer, emphasizing the house's emptiness. Once they disappeared upstairs, Ethan returned to his study. He had work to do, contracts to review. This interruption didn't have to derail his entire evening. 30 minutes later, a knock at the study door broke his concentration. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his laptop. Sarah entered, closing the door behind her. She'd changed into yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. The casual attire didn't soften her expression. "Emily's finally asleep," she said, crossing her arms. "No thanks to you." Ethan saved his document before meeting her gaze. "I provided a room as requested. What more do you expect? How about asking if your pregnant sister is okay?" Showing an ounce of concern. Sarah moved closer, her voice low but intense. "Do you even know what happened?" "I assumed Daniel did something stupid." He leaned back in his chair, maintaining his distance. "Emily has a pattern of choosing unreliable men." Sarah's eyes flashed. "He cheated on her. Your sister found out her husband is sleeping with his marketing director while she's carrying his child, and your response is to blame her judgment." The news hit harder than Ethan expected. He remembered Daniel at the wedding, all earnest promises and declarations of devotion. Another man proving words meant nothing. "All the more reason for her to handle this herself," he said carefully. "Getting involved in other people's relationships never ends well." "She's your sister." Sarah planted her hands on his desk, leaning forward. "And right now, she needs her family. Even if that family is an emotionally stunted workaholic who'd rather hide in his study than face human connection." The familiar scent of her lavender shampoo drifted across the desk, triggering memories he'd rather forget. Summer afternoons by the pool, stolen glances across classrooms, one almost moment at graduation that he'd spent years pretending never happened. "You haven't changed," he observed, keeping his voice neutral. "Neither have you." She straightened up, running a hand through her hair. "Still hiding behind those walls you built. Tell me, Ethan, does it ever get lonely up in your ivory tower?" Before he could respond, a cry from upstairs shattered the tension. They both moved at once, Sarah reaching the door first. Ethan followed her up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. They found Emily in the bathroom, clutching the sink, her face twisted in pain. "The baby," she gasped. "Something's wrong." Sarah was already pulling out her phone to call 911. But Ethan stepped forward, years of buried medical knowledge surfacing. "How long has the pain lasted? Is it sharp or cramping?" "Cramping," Emily whispered. "Started in the car, but I thought it was stress." Ethan pressed his fingers to her wrist, counting her pulse. "How many weeks?" 20. He nodded, calculations running through his head. "Sarah, in my bathroom cabinet, there's a blood pressure monitor. Get it." He guided Emily to sit on the closed toilet lid. Deep breaths slowly. Tell me if the pain changes. Sarah returned with the monitor, her movements quick but controlled. Ethan wrapped the cuff around Emily's arm, his touch clinical but gentle. The reading made him frown. Your blood pressure's too high. He met Emily's frightened eyes. We need to get down before it affects the baby. When was your last checkup? This morning. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Everything was fine until I discovered my husband's betrayal. Ethan felt an unfamiliar surge of anger toward Daniel. Sarah, help her back to bed. I'll get my supplies. Supplies? Sarah's tone was skeptical. I may have left medicine, but I still keep a fully stocked first aid kit. He was already moving toward his room. And I know enough to help until we decide if she needs the hospital. 20 minutes later, Emily lay in bed, her vitals slowly stabilizing. Ethan administered a safe anti-anxiety medication, explaining each step with a precision that had once made him a promising medical resident. Sarah sat on the bed's edge, holding Emily's hand, her earlier hostility toward Ethan temporarily suspended. The baby's moving normally, Emily murmured, relief evident in her voice. I think it was just stress. Probably, Ethan agreed, packing away his equipment. But you need to rest. Stress can cause real complications at this stage. I'll stay with her tonight, Sarah offered, her eyes meeting Ethan's over Emily's head. Something unspoken passed between them. Not quite trust, but perhaps understanding. Ethan nodded, gathering his supplies. At the door, he paused. There's a guest room across the hall. It has fresh linens. He hesitated, then added, if anything changes during the night, get me immediately. Back in his study, Ethan poured another whiskey, but didn't drink it. Instead, he stared at the amber liquid, remembering another night 20 years ago. Sirens, hospital corridors, the weight of failure pressing down like a physical force. His phone buzzed again. Daniel. This time, Ethan answered. Where is she? Daniel demanded without preamble. Safe, Ethan replied, his voice cold. Which is more than I can say for your marriage. Ethan, come on. This is between me and Emily. No, it's not. Ethan cut him off. She's my sister. She's carrying my niece or nephew, and right now, your drama is threatening their health. Stay away, Daniel. I mean it. He ended the call, then blocked the number. Upstairs, he could hear soft voices. Sarah murmuring something comforting, Emily's quiet response. The sounds of his carefully ordered world shifting, realigning around these unexpected inhabitants. Ethan moved to the window, watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. 20 years of maintaining emotional distance, of building walls between himself and any possibility of attachment or loss. Now, in a single night, those walls were developing cracks. He thought of Sarah's accusation. Emotionally stunted workaholic. She wasn't wrong, but watching her take charge tonight, seeing the way she balanced fierce protection with gentle care, he'd glimpsed something that made his carefully constructed solitude feel suddenly hollow. The first drops of rain hit the window, drawing patterns like tears against the glass. Somewhere in the city, Daniel was probably crafting explanations, justifications for his betrayal. But here, in this house that had been too big and too quiet for too long, something was changing. Ethan looked down at his untouched whiskey, then poured it down the sink. Tomorrow would bring new complications, more emotional demands he wasn't equipped to handle. But for tonight, he had done what needed to be done. His sister was safe, her baby's heartbeat strong and steady. And if he found himself thinking about the way Sarah's eyes had softened when he took control of the crisis, about how natural she looked moving through space, well, that was something he'd deal with later. Well, that was a complication he would deal with tomorrow. Sarah woke to the sound of rain against the windows and the unfamiliar shadows of Ethan's guest room. For a moment, she lay still, listening to the quiet rustling of a house too large for its occupants. The digital clock on the nightstand read 5:47 a.m. Too early to be awake, too late to go back to sleep. She slipped from bed, padding across the hall to check on Emily. Her friend slept peacefully, one hand resting protectively over her belly. The morning light painted soft patterns across the bedspread, making the scene look deceptively tranquil. The buzz of Emily's phone on the nightstand caught Sarah's attention. Another message from Daniel. Asterisk, please come home. We can fix this. I love you. Asterisk, she deleted it without hesitation, then silenced the phone. Emily needed rest, not more emotional manipulation. The sound of movement downstairs drew her attention. Following the noise, she found Ethan in the kitchen, dressed in running gear, mixing something in a blender. You're up early, she observed, lingering in the doorway. He didn't turn around. Daily routine. 5-mile run, protein shake, shower, work by 7. Some things never change. Sarah moved to the coffee maker, noting it was already prepared. Still plotting your day in 15-minute increments? Structure maintains productivity. He poured the green concoction into a glass. There's prenatal vitamins in the cabinet for Emily and fresh fruit in the fridge. Sarah paused in measuring coffee grounds. You bought prenatal vitamins? Ordered them last night. Ethan finally met her gaze, along with other supplies she might need. The nearest pharmacy is 20 minutes away. Better to be prepared. The gesture surprised her. Thoughtful, practical, yet somehow distant. Typical Ethan. Thank you, she said softly, for everything last night. The medical training came in handy. Something flickered across his face. 8 years of medical school should be good for something, even if I never finish residency. He set his glass down with more force than necessary. I need to run. Help yourself to whatever you need. Ethan. Sarah caught his arm as he passed. The contact sent an unexpected charge through her fingers. Why did you really leave medicine? He stiffened but didn't pull away. You know why. After Mom. He stopped, jaw tightening. I have to go. This time, when he moved, she let him. The back door closed behind him with a quiet click, leaving Sarah alone in the kitchen that was both state-of-the-art and clearly underused. She was on her second cup of coffee when Emily appeared, wrapped in a borrowed robe that seemed to swallow her small frame. You should be resting, Sarah chided, but she was already pulling out a chair. Emily sank into it gratefully. The baby's doing somersaults. No rest happening anyway. She accepted the glass of water Sarah offered. Where's Ethan? Running. Apparently, some people enjoy torturing themselves at dawn. Sarah started gathering breakfast ingredients. How are you feeling? Really, Emily's hands trembled slightly around her glass, like I'm living someone else's life. Yesterday morning, I had a husband, a home, and a plan. Now, she trailed off, blinking back tears. Now you have a chance to build something better. Sarah cracked eggs into a bowl with more force than necessary. Daniel doesn't deserve you or this baby. He's called 17 times. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Texted even more. He says he'll go to counseling, that it was a mistake, that he loves me. Don't. Sarah turned from the stove, spatula pointed like a weapon. Don't let him manipulate you. Men like that, they're sorry they got caught, not sorry they did it. Emily managed a weak smile. Speaking from experience? You remember Richard. Sarah attacked the eggs with renewed vigor. 3 years of mistakes, and it all meant nothing. But I love you. Never again. The back door opened, bringing a gust of cool air and a rain-dampened Ethan. He paused at the sight of them, like a wild animal suddenly confronted with humanity. Morning. Emily offered tentatively. Ethan nodded, his expression softening slightly. How are you feeling? Better. Emily rubbed her belly absently. Thank you for, well, everything. The vitamins are in the cabinet above the sink, he said, already moving toward the stairs. Take them with food. Join us for breakfast, Sarah called after him. The eggs are almost ready. He hesitated, one foot on the bottom stair. For a moment, Sarah thought he would refuse, retreat to his usual solitude. Then his shoulders relaxed fractionally. Let me shower first. 20 minutes later, they sat around Ethan's seldom-used dining table, steam rising from plates of eggs and toast. The silence was awkward but not unbearable. I need to go to the office today, Ethan said eventually, breaking the quiet. I have meetings I can't reschedule. We'll be fine, Sarah assured him, but Emily's face fell slightly. Actually, Emily set down her fork. I should probably go back to the city. Get some clothes, my pregnancy journal, important papers. Absolutely not. Sarah and Ethan spoke in unison, then looked at each other in surprise. Ethan recovered first. Daniel will be watching the apartment. It's not safe. I'll go, Sarah decided. I know where everything is, and he won't expect me. Not alone. Ethan's tone left no room for argument. I'll reschedule my meetings. We'll go together. Sarah opened her mouth to protest, then reconsidered. Fine, but I'm driving. It's a 2-hour round trip minimum. Ethan checked his watch. We should leave within the hour. I don't want to cause trouble, Emily protested weakly. You're not. Ethan stood, gathering plates with efficient movements. Family takes care of family. The words hung in the air, unexpected and weighted with meaning. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and even Sarah felt something catch in her throat. An hour later, they were on the highway, rain creating a rhythmic pattern against the windshield. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, his presence both familiar and strange. Your sister needs a lawyer, he said after 20 minutes of silence. Sarah signaled for a lane change. Already on it. I called Olivia Bennett last night. My cousin, remember her? She specializes in family law now. The one who used to follow me around at neighborhood barbecues. A hint of amusement colored his voice. That's her. She's a shark in the courtroom now. Sarah smiled despite herself. The crush on you probably motivated her law career. I doubt that. But his lips twitched slightly. They fell into silence again, but it felt different, almost comfortable. Sarah stole glances at his profile, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed restlessly against his thigh. You're worried about her, she observed. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Pregnancy complications killed our mother. Now Emily is dealing with extreme stress during a high-risk pregnancy. She's stronger than you think. Strength doesn't prevent preeclampsia. Sarah reached over, squeezing his hand briefly. That's why we're here, to help her be strong. He didn't pull away immediately, and the warmth of his skin lingered on her palm long after she returned her hand to the wheel. The apartment building looked exactly the same, but everything felt different. Sarah led the way up, using her emergency key. Inside, evidence of Emily's life with Daniel was everywhere. Photos, shared belongings, the half-drunk coffee mug he'd left on the counter yesterday morning. I'll get her documents, Ethan said, moving toward the home office. You handle clothes and personal items. They worked efficiently, filling suitcases and boxes. Sarah was in the nursery, carefully packing tiny clothes and half-finished projects, when she heard the front door open. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression warning her to be quiet. Footsteps moved through the apartment. Daniel, home from his hotel rendezvous. Emily? His voice carried clearly. Baby, are you here? Sarah moved to the door, but Ethan caught her arm, pulling her back against his chest. His heartbeat was strong against her shoulder blades, his breath warm against her hair. Stay quiet, he whispered, barely audible. The footsteps grew closer. Sarah held her breath, acutely aware of Ethan's hand still gripping her arm, of the way they fit together in the shadows of the nursery door. Daniel appeared at the end of the hall, his face haggard. He looked into the master bedroom, then turned toward the nursery. Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself in the doorway. She's not here. Daniel stumbled back, startled. Ethan? Where are you? His eyes narrowed as he spotted Sarah behind Ethan. Where is she? Safe, Ethan said coldly. And staying that way. This is between me and my wife. Not anymore. Ethan's voice could have frozen water. You lost that right when you decided to sleep with your marketing director while your pregnant wife was at her doctor's appointment. Daniel flinched. It was a mistake. One time. 6 months, Ethan countered. Sarah cut in, unable to stay silent. I saw the hotel receipts, Daniel. The dinner reservations. The weekend conferences that only you and Olivia attended. His face darkened. You had no right to. Enough. Ethan took a step forward, and something in his stance made Daniel back up. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave now. Emily's lawyer will contact you about divorce proceedings. Until then, you stay away from her. Or I'll make sure every potential client knows exactly what kind of man you are. You can't. Try me. Ethan's voice was terrifyingly calm. I own half the companies you do business with. One word from me, and your career is over. Now get out. Daniel opened his mouth and closed it. His eyes darted between them before he turned and fled, the front door slamming behind him. Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was necessary. Ethan turned to her, and for a moment, they were too close. The air between them charged with something undefined. Then he stepped back. We should finish packing. They worked in silence after that, but something had shifted. Sarah felt in the way Ethan anticipated her movements, passing her items before she asked, catching things before they fell. A dance of unconscious coordination that spoke of old familiarity and new awareness. As they loaded the last box into the car, rain still falling steadily, Sarah caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked. He looked away. "We should get back. Emily will be worried." But as they pulled away from the curb, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that everything was changing. Not just for Emily, but for all of them. Emily stood at the living room window, watching rain blur the landscape into impressionist smears of green and gray. The baby moved restlessly inside her, matching her anxiety as she waited for Sarah and Ethan to return. The house felt too big, too quiet without them, a museum of carefully curated loneliness. Her phone vibrated again. Another message from Daniel. She'd stopped reading them hours ago, but her finger hovered over the delete button. Each message felt like picking at a wound, preventing it from healing. The security system chimed, announcing a car at the gate. Emily pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching Sarah's car wind to drive. Even from this distance, she could see her brother's rigid posture in the passenger seat. They emerged from the car, laden with boxes and bags, pieces of her old life salvaged from the wreckage. Ethan reached the door first, his hair damp from the rain. "Did you see him?" Emily asked before he could speak. Ethan's expression hardened. "He won't bother you again." "Ethan," Sarah's voice held a warning as she set down an armload of bags. "She needs to know." Emily's hands instinctively cradled her belly. "Know what?" Daniel showed up while we were there. Sarah moved closer, her tone gentle. There was a confrontation, but Ethan handled it. Handled it how? Emily looked between them, noting the tension in her brother's shoulders, the way Sarah kept glancing at him. I made the consequences of his actions clear. Ethan started carrying boxes upstairs, his movement precise and controlled. The lawyer will contact him about divorce proceedings. Divorce? The word fell foreign on Emily's tongue. I haven't decided. Yes, you have. Sarah's voice was firm but kind. You're just not ready to say it out loud yet. Emily sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. The baby kicked sharply, as if protesting her distress. I thought we were happy. How could I not see it? Because you trusted him. Ethan paused on the stairs, his expression softening slightly. That's not a failure on your part. When did you get so wise about relationships? The words slipped out before Emily could stop them. Ethan's face closed off. Experience isn't always about success. He disappeared upstairs with the boxes, leaving a weighted silence behind. Sarah sat beside Emily, taking her hand. He means well, even if he shows it strangely. I know. Emily squeezed her friend's fingers. I just wish. Sometimes I think about how different things might be if Mom hadn't died, if he hadn't quit medical school, if we'd stayed closer as a family. The past shapes us, Sarah said carefully, but it doesn't have to define us. Upstairs, something crashed, followed by muffled cursing. Sarah rose. I should help him before he destroys something expensive. Emily watched her go, noting the way Sarah took the stairs two at a time, how naturally she moved through Ethan's space. Some things hadn't changed since high school, including the way her brother's eyes followed Sarah when he thought no one was looking. In the guest room that was becoming hers, Emily found Ethan and Sarah surrounded by open boxes, arguing over the best way to organize her belongings. The nursery items should stay packed, Ethan was saying. The room across the hall needs work before it's suitable. She needs a nest, Ethan. Sarah pulled out a tiny yellow onesie. Pregnant women need to prepare the space. The paint fumes. I'll handle the painting. Sarah's tone brooked no argument. You can supervise the furniture assembly. I have meetings. Cancel them. Emily cleared her throat. I'm right here, you know. They turned, looking almost guilty. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she remembered from childhood. The room needs work, he said more gently. But if you want to set it up, we can make it happen. We. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Yes, we. Ethan met her challenging look. Unless you know how to install ceiling fans and repair drywall. A smile tugged at Sarah's lips. I'm sure you'll teach me. Something passed between them, a current of understanding that made Emily feel simultaneously included and like an intruder. The baby kicked again, harder this time. Oh! The exclamation escaped before she could stop it, her hand flying to her side. Ethan was beside her instantly, medical training overtaking his usual reserve. Pain. No, just... Emily grabbed his hand, placing it where the baby was moving. For a moment, Ethan froze. Then the baby kicked again, strong and clear, against his palm. His face transformed, wonder replacing caution, joy cracking through his careful mask. That's, he swallowed hard. That's my niece or nephew? Active little one. Sarah observed, moving closer, just like their mother at that age. Ethan's head snapped up. You remember Emily at that age? I remember everything. Sarah's voice was soft. Including how you used to read medical textbooks to your mom's belly, convinced it would make the baby smarter. Emily watched her brother's face. Seeing emotions war across features usually kept carefully neutral. I know you did that. I was 15. Ethan withdrew his hand, walls sliding back into place. I thought I could fix anything with enough study. Ethan, Sarah reached for him, but he stepped back. The nursery needs planning. I'll make some calls about supplies. He was gone before either of them could respond. Footsteps echoing down the hall. Sarah stared after him, something like pain crossing her face. He still blames himself. For Mom. Emily sank onto the bed, suddenly tired. It wasn't his fault. He was just a medical student. There was nothing he could have done. Tried telling him that. Sarah began unpacking clothes with sharp, agitated movements. He carries guilt like armor, using it to keep everyone at a distance. Not everyone. Emily watched her friend carefully. He lets you get closer than most. Sarah's hand stilled on a folded sweater. That's different. Why? Because... Sarah shook her head. It's complicated. It doesn't have to be. Emily patted the bed beside her. Sit. Tell me what happened between you two. The real story, not the sanitized version I got years ago. For a moment, Sarah looked ready to refuse. Then she sat, the sweater still clutched in her hands. It was graduation night, the party at the Richardsons' house, remember? Emily nodded. She'd been 13, deemed too young to attend, but she remembered Sarah getting ready. Beautiful in a blue dress, nervous in a way she'd never seen before. Ethan and I ended up on the back porch, talking about the future. He was headed to medical school. I was going to NYU. Everything was changing. Sarah smoothed the sweater absently. He kissed me or I kissed him. I'm still not sure who moved first. But it was perfect until it wasn't. What happened? Your mom got sick the next week. Everything fell apart so fast. The diagnosis, the pregnancy complications, the funeral. Ethan withdrew from everyone, transferred to a different medical school. When he finally came back years later, he was different, clothes off. But you never stopped caring about him, Emily said softly. Sarah's laugh was shaky. Caring about your brother is like caring about a wall, Sarah said, her voice tinged with bitterness. Necessary, sometimes painful, and generally unrewarding. Downstairs, a door slammed. Ethan's voice carried faintly through the house. He was on the phone, probably arranging contractors for the nursery. Always practical, always in control. He's not a wall, Emily said after a moment. He's more like a window. The glass is there, keeping everything separate and safe. but if you look closely enough, you can see through to what's inside. Sarah stood abruptly. We should finish unpacking. You need to rest soon. But Emily caught her hand. The thing about windows, Sarah, is that sometimes they open. You just have to find the right latch. Before Sarah could respond, Ethan appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. The contractors can start tomorrow. I've ordered supplies for a full renovation. He looked between them, noticing their joined hands, the tension in the air. Everything okay? Fine, Sarah said quickly, pulling away, just discussing nursery colors. Ethan's eyes lingered on her face, seeing more than she probably wanted him to. I have work to do. Call if you need anything. After he left, Emily watched Sarah return to unpacking, her movements less certain than before. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving everything washed clean and new. You know, Emily said carefully, sometimes the people who seem most determined to keep everyone out are the ones most desperate to let someone in. Sarah didn't respond, but her hands trembled slightly as she hung Emily's dresses in the closet. The baby kicked again, gentler this time, like a reminder that life continued, changed, and grew in unexpected ways. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 4 times. In a few hours, they would have dinner, another careful dance of avoidance and attraction, of words unspoken and feelings denied. But for now, Emily watched her friend arrange her old life in this new space and thought about windows and walls and the courage it takes to reach for latches that might or might not open. The contractors arrived early the next morning, their trucks rolling up the driveway like harbingers of change. Ethan stood in the soon-to-be nursery, directing the removal of old wallpaper and worn carpeting with military precision. Each decision was calculated, measured against safety regulations and air quality standards he'd researched until midnight. The paint needs to be 0 VOC, he instructed the foreman, and the carpet, hypoallergenic, natural fibers. No chemical treatments. Sarah appeared in the doorway with 2 coffee cups. We covered this last night, Ethan, 3 times. He accepted the coffee without meeting her eyes, since their conversation about the kiss last night. Overheard through the thin walls of his home office, he'd been more distant than usual. Sarah tried not to let it bother her. The windows need replacing, Ethan continued, addressing the foreman. Double pane with proper sealing and child-proofing mechanisms. Sarah added, Emily's going to have a crawler before we know it. The casual we hung in the air between them. Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Speaking of Emily, Sarah said, she's asking for you. Something about the divorce papers. Ethan handed his coffee back to Sarah, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent an unwanted spark through her arm. I'll check on her. Once he was gone, Sarah surveyed the room. Beneath the peeling wallpaper, the walls held traces of old murals, clouds and stars, painted decades ago for a nursery that had never been used. Ethan's mother had been preparing this room for the baby she never got to meet. Miss Bennett? The foreman held up a section of wallpaper. We found something you might want to see. Behind the paper, written in careful teenage handwriting, asterisk my little brother or sister, love Ethan. December 12th, 1999, asterisk. The date hit Sarah like a physical blow. 3 days before his mother's death. Leave that section, she decided. Work around it. Downstairs, she found Emily and Ethan in the kitchen, heads bent over legal documents. Emily's face was pale but determined. He's contesting everything, Emily was saying. The house, the savings, even preliminary custody arrangements. He won't win. Ethan's voice held that dangerous calm Sarah remembered from their confrontation with Daniel. Olivia is prepared for this. But his family has money connections. So do I. Ethan straightened, every inch a successful businessman. And unlike Daniel, I actually know how to use them. Sarah cleared her throat. How about some tea? The baby doesn't need distress. Emily managed a weak smile. The baby's fine, active, actually. Want to feel. She held out her hand to Ethan, but he stepped back. I should check on the contractors. Sarah watched him practically flee the kitchen, noting the hurt that flashed across Emily's face. He's trying, Sarah said softly. In his own way, by running away? Emily shuffled the papers with trembling hands. He can't even look at my belly anymore, not since yesterday. It's not about you. Sarah started preparing tea, needing something to do with her hands. The nursery. It's bringing up memories. Hard ones. Then why do this? Why insist on renovating it now? Because you need it. Sarah set the kettle down with more force than necessary. And because Ethan needs to face these ghosts before they consume him completely. Emily was quiet for a moment, absently rubbing her belly. You still love him, don't you? The question caught Sarah off guard. Emily, don't. Deny it. I see the way you look at him when you think no one's watching. The way you anticipate his needs. Push his boundaries. We were kids, Sarah protested weakly. One kiss at a graduation party doesn't. This isn't about a kiss 20 years ago. Emily's voice was gentle but firm. This is about now. About the way you both orbit each other like binary stars. Pulled together and terrified a collision. Before Sarah could respond, a crash from upstairs shattered the moment. They rushed to the nursery, finding Ethan amid a pile of broken drywall, his hand bleeding. What happened? Sarah demanded, already reaching for him. Ethan pulled away, cradling his injured hand, hit a weak spot in the wall. It's nothing. That's not nothing. Sarah grabbed his wrist, ignoring his resistance. You're getting blood on the floor. The contractors have gone to lunch. I don't care, she cut him off. Now sit down and let me look at that hand. To her surprise, he complied, sinking onto an unopened box of supplies. Emily hovered in the doorway, concern etched on her face. First aid kit, Sarah asked. Bathroom across the hall. Emily supplied. I'll get it. Alone with Ethan, Sarah carefully examined his hand. The cut wasn't deep, but it would need cleaning. His fingers were cold despite the warmth of the day. Want to tell me what really happened? She asked quietly. Ethan stared at the exposed wall, where his childhood message was now visible. I forgot I wrote that. Ethan, I promised her. His voice was barely audible. The night before, she was worried about the baby. I promised everything would be fine, that I'd take care of them both. Sarah's heart ached. You were 15. There was nothing you could have done. I was in the room when she coded. First-year medical student. Frozen in place while real doctors tried to save her. His fingers curled around Sarah's, seeking warmth or comfort, or both. They couldn't save either of them. Emily returned with a first aid kit, but stopped in the doorway, sensing the gravity of the moment. You were a child, Sarah insisted, cleaning his wound with gentle strokes. A brilliant, dedicated child who loved his mother. But you couldn't prevent what happened. I quit medicine because I couldn't trust myself. Ethan watched her bandage his hand, his voice hollow. How can I trust myself with anything that matters? You trust yourself with me, Emily spoke from the doorway, one hand pressed against her belly. And this baby. Ethan looked up sharply. Emily. No, listen. She moved into the room, determination straightening her spine. Every time I've needed you this week, you've been there, checking my blood pressure, confronting Daniel, making this house safe for my child. You're not running away, Ethan. You're running toward us. Sarah finished securing the bandage but didn't release his hand. She's right. The man who wrote that message on the wall. He's still here, still trying to protect everyone. He just needs to forgive himself. Ethan's fingers tightened around hers. For a moment, the three of them existed in perfect understanding. A brother haunted by the past, a sister facing an uncertain future, and a woman who had loved them both in different ways for 20 years. Then the baby kicked, hard enough that Emily gasped, and the spell broke. Ethan pulled his hand away, the wall slamming back into place. The contractors will be back soon, he stood, straightening his shirt with his uninjured hand. We should clear the room. But as they moved toward the door, Sarah couldn't help but notice the way Ethan's eyes lingered on her. Just for a moment, before he turned away. Laura grabbed his arm. Look. She pointed to where afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the faded mural beneath the wallpaper. Angels and stars danced across the walls, preserved like memories beneath layers of time. Mom's design, Lucas said softly. She wanted stars for her last baby. Then that's what we'll do. Sarah touched his shoulder lightly. Stars for this baby, too. A connection to the past, but looking toward the future. Lucas didn't shrug off her touch. Instead, he covered her hand with his bandage one. Just for a moment. Stars, he agreed. And safety features. Laura laughed. The sound bright in the dusty room. Of course. Heaven forbid we forget the safety features. The contractor's trucks rumbled up the driveway, breaking the moment. Lucas moved away, already shifting back into project manager mode. Something had changed, a crack in the foundation of his carefully constructed walls. Sarah watched him direct the afternoon's work, noting how he kept glancing at the message on the wall, at the stars peeking through decades of paper. Sometimes healing didn't come in grand gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes it came in broken drywall, bandaged hands, and old messages found and new promises made. The baby kicked again and Laura smiled, rubbing her belly. Active today. Growing stronger, Sarah said, but her eyes were on Lucas as he explained the window specifications to a contractor. Just like the rest of us, Laura added. 3 days into the nursery renovation, Sarah found herself alone in Ethan's kitchen at midnight, nursing a cup of chamomile tea. The house creaked and settled around her, its vast spaces filled with a kind of silence that made thoughts too loud to ignore. Her phone buzzed. A text from Olivia Bennett, her cousin and Emily's lawyer. Asterisk check your email. Daniel's legal team just filed their response. It's not good. Asterisk. Sarah's hand shook as she opened her laptop. The legal document was dense with terminology, but certain phrases jumped out. Asterisk alienation of affection. Psychological manipulation. Conspiracy to interfere with marriage. Asterisk Daniel wasn't just fighting the divorce. He was attacking them all. You're up late, she startled at Ethan's voice. He stood in the doorway, wearing sleep pants and a faded Harvard Medical School t-shirt, his hair mussed away that made him look younger, more vulnerable. So are you, she countered, closing the laptop. What's wrong? Nothing. Sarah. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of the soap. Clean and familiar. You're a terrible liar. Always have been. She pushed the laptop toward him. Daniel's lawyers filed their response to the divorce petition. Ethan read quickly, his expression darkening with each paragraph. He's claiming we manipulated Emily, that we orchestrated this to destroy his marriage. He's desperate. Sarah wrapped her hands around her cooling tea. And his family has deep pockets. So do I... Ethan's voice held that dangerous edge again. I'll call my lawyers in the morning. It's not just about money. Sarah stood, needing to move. He's painting Emily as emotionally unstable, claiming the stress of pregnancy is making her irrational. If he can convince a judge, he won't. You don't know that, she spun to face him. He's trying to force her back, Ethan, using the baby as leverage. If he gets shared custody... Stop. Ethan caught her shoulders, steadying her. We won't let that happen. We felt different this time. Not casual or accidental, but deliberate. A choice. I promised to protect her, Sarah whispered. After everything with Richard, I swore I'd never let anyone manipulate someone I love like that again. Ethan's hands tightened slightly. You never told me what really happened with him. You never asked. But the old pain rose anyway, demanding voice. 3 years of gaslighting, of you're too sensitive and you're imagining things. Every time I caught him in a lie, he turned it around until I doubted myself. By the end, I barely recognized my own reflection. Sarah, her name was almost a groan. Why didn't you tell me? You were barely speaking to anyone then. Besides, she managed a weak smile, what would you have done? Threatened him with your business connections. I would have killed him. The raw honesty in his voice made her look up. In the dim kitchen lighting, his eyes were dark with an emotion she couldn't or wouldn't name. Ethan. Thunder cracked outside, making them both jump. Rain began pelting the windows, and somewhere upstairs, a door slammed. Emily, they said in unison, already moving. They found her in the nursery, surrounded by paint samples and fabric swatches. tears streaming down her face. "I got an alert," she choked out, holding up her phone. "Daniel's lawyers. They're saying I'm unfit, that I'm endangering the baby by leaving, that I need psychiatric evaluation. They're desperate," Sarah started, but Emily cut her off. "What if they're right? What if I am being irrational? I mean, who leaves their husband at 5 months pregnant? Someone who deserves better than a cheating bastard," Ethan said flatly. Both women stared at him. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Look," he continued, gentler now, "Daniel isn't fighting for you or the baby. He's fighting for control. The same way he controlled your joint accounts, your social circle, your career decisions." "I never told you about that," Emily whispered. "You didn't have to. I saw it happening, but he stopped, swallowing hard. I was too caught up in my own isolation to help. Not this time." Lightning illuminated the room, casting strange shadows on the half-finished walls. Sarah moved to close the windows against the rain and noticed Emily swaying slightly. "You need to rest," she said firmly. "Stress isn't good for the baby." "I know." Emily pressed a hand to her temple. "I just feel so dizzy." Ethan was beside her instantly, medical training taking over. "How long?" "Since I got the notification. Maybe an hour. I thought it was just anxiety." He pressed his fingers to her wrist, counting silently. "Your pulse is racing. Sarah, get my blood pressure monitor." "Already on it." She was halfway to his room when she heard the thud. Emily had collapsed, Ethan barely catching her before she hit the floor. Sarah's heart stopped, then started again at double speed. "Call 911, Ethan ordered, laying Emily carefully on her side. "Then bring my medical bag from the study." Sarah's fingers shook as she dialed, rattling off their location to the dispatcher. She watched Ethan check Emily's pupils, her pulse, her breathing. "BP's dropping," he muttered. "Come on, Emily, stay with me." The baby chose that moment to kick, the movement visible even through Emily's loose nightgown. Ethan's face went white. "No," he whispered. "Not again. Not like Mom." "Ethan," Sarah knelt beside him, keeping the phone pressed to her ear. "Focus. What you need?" The question seemed to snap him back. "Left side position to improve blood flow. Monitor vitals. Watch for seizures." His voice steadied with each instruction. "Ambulance ETA 8 minutes." Too long. He was already gathering Emily in his arms. "We'll meet them halfway. The hospital's 15 minutes out. We can do it in 10. "The storm." "I know these roads blind." He started down the stairs, moving with careful speed. "Grab her medical file from my desk and call Dr. Harper. Her number's on the fridge." They moved like a well-oiled machine, years of unspoken understanding translating into seamless action. Sarah drove while Ethan monitored Emily's vitals from the back seat, his voice steady as he relayed information to Dr. Harper over the speakerphone. The storm raged around them, but Sarah had never felt more focused. Rain lashed the windshield as she navigated curves she'd known since childhood, guided by Ethan's calm directions. "Turn coming up," he warned. Then straight shot to the emergency entrance. Emily stirred slightly, mumbling something about the baby. Ethan squeezed her hand. "Stay with us," he murmured. "Both of you." Sarah caught his eye in the rearview mirror, seeing not the controlled businessman or the wounded son, but the teenager who'd written promises on nursery walls. The boy who wanted to save everyone. They beat the ambulance to the hospital by 2 minutes. Emergency staff swarmed the car, efficiently transferring Emily to a gurney, while Ethan rattled off vital signs and medical history. Possible preeclampsia, he concluded. Blood pressure was 160/100 before losing consciousness. The doctor nodded, already moving. "We'll take it from here, sir." "I'm a former medical student," Ethan started, but the doors were closing. Sarah caught him before he could follow. "Let them work." He turned to her, and for the first time in 20 years, she saw his walls completely down. Fear, guilt, and desperate hope warred across his face. "I can't lose them," he whispered. "Not like Mom. Not again." She pulled him close, feeling him shudder against her. "You won't." Laura's voice, stronger than you remember, cut through the tension. You're not alone this time. Ethan's arms came around Sarah, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid with rain and fear. They stood in the emergency bay, soaked to the skin, while lightning crashed and medical equipment beeped. Somewhere above them, Emily fought for herself and her child. "She'll be okay," Sarah murmured, as much to convince herself as him. "They both will." Ethan's only response was to hold her tighter, his heart hammering against her chest in a rhythm that felt like both question and answer, like fear and hope and something else, something that had waited 20 years to be acknowledged. The automatic doors whooshed open, bringing Dr. Harper's familiar figure hurrying through the rain. Reality crashed back in, demanding action, decisions, strength. But for that moment in the storm, everything that mattered existed in the space between heartbeats, in the warmth of arms finally allowing themselves to hold on, in the promise of dawn after darkness, even if neither of them was ready to name it yet. The hospital waiting room held that peculiar timelessness unique to places where life and death negotiated their boundaries. Dawn crept through the windows, painting the sterile walls in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscenely cheerful given the circumstances. Sarah paced, her shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Across the room, Ethan sat perfectly still, his rain-dampened shirt dark against the pale blue chairs. They hadn't spoken since Dr. Harper disappeared behind those swinging doors, each lost in their own private hell of waiting. Family of Emily Carter? They both jumped at Dr. Harper's voice. The older woman looked tired but not devastated. A good sign, Sarah's mind supplied desperately. "How is she?" Ethan was on his feet, all careful distance abandoned. The baby? Stable, both of them. Dr. Harper's smile was genuine. "We caught the preeclampsia early enough. The medications are working. Her blood pressure is normalizing, and the baby's heartbeat is strong." Sarah's knees went weak with relief. She grabbed the nearest chair, sinking into it as the doctor continued. "She'll need to stay for observation, probably through the weekend, and after that, complete bed rest until delivery. No stress, no excitement, regular monitoring." "Can we see her?" Sarah asked, briefly. She's groggy from medication, but asking for both of you. Dr. Harper's eyes lingered on Ethan. "She's in room 507. "The same room." Ethan's voice was tight. "Mom was in 507. Understanding flickered across the doctor's face. "I can have her moved." "No." Ethan straightened his shoulders. Some ghosts need facing. Sarah fell into step beside him as they walked the familiar corridor. Their shoulders brushed with each step, neither pulling away from the contact. Emily lay surrounded by monitors, their steady beeping a reassuring chorus. Her face was pale but peaceful, one hand resting protectively over her belly. "Hey, troublemaker," Sarah said softly, taking her other hand. "You scared us." Emily's eyes fluttered open. "Sorry, didn't mean to cause a drama." That was all Daniel. Ethan moved to the other side of the bed, his movements carefully controlled. His lawyer's threats triggered this episode. Dr. Harper's adding it to your file. Evidence of him endangering your health and the baby's. Always a strategist. Emily managed a weak smile. Even at 3 a.m. in a crisis. Someone has to be, but his hand shook slightly as he adjusted her blanket. A nurse appeared with more medication, shooing them out with practiced efficiency. In the hallway, Sarah found herself studying Ethan's profile, noting the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "When was the last time you were here?" she asked quietly. "In this hospital?" "The day I quit medical school." He didn't look at her. "After Mom. I couldn't walk these halls anymore. Couldn't trust myself to help anyone. But you did help. Tonight, you knew exactly what to do. You probably saved both their lives." "I got lucky." "No." Sarah grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. "You were prepared, focused, strong. The same way you've been since Emily arrived. Stop punishing yourself for something that happened 20 years ago." "Ethan, room for one more visitor?" They both turned at the new voice. Daniel stood in the corridor, trying to project confidence despite his rumpled appearance. "Get out Ethan's voice dropped to that dangerous register. She's my wife. Daniel took a step forward. I have a right. Your rights. Sarah moved between them, fury rising like a tide. You lost those when you forced her into a medical crisis with your legal threats. When you chose your mistress over your pregnant wife. When I what? Daniel's facade cracked. When I acted like a normal man. Emily's been distant for months. Obsessed with the baby, with her career. Olivia understands me. Supports me. The sound of Ethan's fist connecting with Daniel's jaw echoed through the quiet corridor. Daniel stumbled back, more shocked than hurt. You self-centered bastard. Ethan advanced, radiating cold fury. Your wife is fighting for her life, and our niece or nephew, because of your games. And you justify your affair? I'll have you arrested, Daniel sputtered. Add assault to the lawsuit. Try it. Ethan's smile was all teeth. Explain to a judge how you showed up at the hospital after your legal threats put your pregnant wife in danger. How you tried to force your way into her room against medical advice. How you admitted to ongoing infidelity in front of witnesses. Security arrived, drawn by the commotion. Sarah watched with grim satisfaction as they escorted a protesting Daniel away. Your hand, she said once they were alone again. Ethan flexed his fingers, wincing slightly. Worth it. She took his hand, examining the reddened knuckles. Let me get some ice. Sarah, his fingers curled around hers. Thank you for everything tonight. I couldn't have. Wasn't this cozy? They turned to find Olivia Bennett, Daniel's mistress and the catalyst for this whole mess, standing in the corridor. She was perfectly put together despite the early hour, her expression a study in false concern. Daniel called me, she said smoothly. He's worried about Emily. Naturally, we both are. Get out. Sarah's voice shook with rage. Before I forget, we're in a hospital. Now, Sarah, is that any way to treat family? After all, once Emily comes to her senses and goes home where she belongs, we'll all need to learn to get along. The only place Emily belongs, Ethan said with deadly calm, is away from you and your married lover. Such drama. Olivia smiled, all perfect teeth and practiced charm. But then, you'd know all about drama, wouldn't you, Ethan? The tragic medical student who couldn't save his own mother. Tell me, does Emily know the whole story? About your mistakes that day? Ethan went rigid. Sarah felt a change through their still joined hands. What mistakes? Emily's voice drifted from the doorway. She stood, swaying slightly, one hand braced against the door frame. Ethan, what is she talking about? You shouldn't be up, Sarah started, but Emily's focus was entirely on her brother. What mistakes? She repeated. Tell me what she means about Mom's death. Perhaps I should go, Olivia purred, clearly delighted with the chaos she created. Family matters and all that. Stay. Emily's command stopped Olivia mid-turn. Since you brought it up, you can hear the truth too. Ethan. The monitors in Emily's room beeped a warning as her heart rate increased. Ethan moved toward her, medical training warring with emotional paralysis. Please, Emily whispered. I need to know. Sarah watched Ethan's walls crumble, years of carefully maintained distance dissolving under his sister's plea. I was there, he said finally, voice raw, when Mom started hemorrhaging. The senior doctor was delayed, and I thought I could help. I gave her medication, but it was the wrong dosage. By the time they got there, he stopped, swallowing hard. The death certificate says complications of pregnancy. But if I hadn't interfered... You tried to save her. Emily's hand moved to her belly, an unconscious gesture of protection. All these years, I thought you were just too busy studying to be there. But you were trying to help. I made it worse. Ethan's voice was barely audible. I lost both of them because I thought I knew more than I did. Oh, this is better than I hoped. Olivia's laugh was pure poison. The perfect Ethan Reeves, responsible for his own mother's death. Wait until Daniel's lawyers hear about this. Your credibility as Emily's protector will be... Finish that sentence. Sarah turned to her, years of buried rage surfacing. Give me one reason to show you exactly what growing up with 3 brothers taught me about fighting. Violence, Sarah? Olivia smirked. Violence, Sarah confirmed, her voice steady. Now get out before I make you regret it. Olivia hesitated, then turned on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. In the silence that followed, Ethan turned to Emily, his face a mask of guilt and pain. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. I should have told you. I should have. You were a kid, Emily interrupted, her voice firm. You tried to save her. That's all that matters. Sarah watched as Ethan's shoulders slumped, the weight of 2 decades of guilt finally beginning to lift. We're family, Emily said softly, and family takes care of each other, no matter what. For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to nod, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Family, he echoed, his voice steady. Always. How primitive, Veronica sneered, but she took a step back. I just think everyone deserves to know the truth. The truth? Laura pushed away from the doorframe, swaying but determined. The truth is that my brother was a teenager trying to save our mother. The truth is that you and Marcos are so morally bankrupt that you'd use a family tragedy as a legal weapon. The truth is... The monitor shrilled as Laura's knees buckled. Lucas caught her, years of guilt forgotten in the instant need to protect. Get Dr. Richardson, he ordered Helena, already lifting Laura back to the bed. And someone remove her. He jerked his head toward Veronica. Helena pulled the emergency cord, then advanced on Veronica with murderous intent. Leave. Now, or I'll give you a much closer look at this hospital's emergency services. Something in her expression must have registered because Veronica retreated, her perfect composure finally cracking. Dr. Richardson arrived at a run, quickly assessing the situation. Everyone out. Now. In the hallway, Helena found Lucas braced against the wall, his face buried in his hands. Without hesitation, she pulled him into her arms. She knows, he choked out, after all these years of protecting her from the truth. And she still loves you, Helena held him tighter, because you were a boy trying to save his mother, not a monster who caused her death. It's time to forgive that boy, Lucas. Let him rest. For a moment, she thought he would pull away. Instead, his arms came around her waist, and he buried his face in her shoulder. They stood like that as dawn painted the hospital windows gold, as monitors beeped and nurses hurried past. As 2 decades of guilt finally began to loosen their hold on a heart that had been frozen for far too long. And somewhere in room 507, a baby's heartbeat stayed strong and steady, proving that sometimes the best protection isn't perfect strength, but the courage to be perfectly, completely human. 3 days after the hospital crisis, Helena found herself in Lucas's home office, surrounded by legal documents and empty coffee cups. Olivia had been sending updates hourly. Marcos' team was backing down after the hospital incident, their aggressive strategy crumbling in the face of medical documentation and witness statements. They're offering a settlement, Helena rubbed her tired eyes. Full custody to Laura, generous support, no contested divorce. Lucas looked up from his laptop, dark circles shadowing his eyes. He'd barely slept since Laura's admission. What's the catch? Non-disclosure agreement. They want to protect Marcos' reputation. Of course they do. His laugh was bitter. Heaven forbid anyone know what he really is. Helena studied him across the desk. Since a confession about his mother's death, something had shifted between them. The walls were still there, but they'd grown transparent, allowing glimpses of the pain and the possibility behind them. Laura's being discharged tomorrow, she said carefully. The doctors say she can go home if she follows their restrictions. This is her home. The speed of his response surprised them both. Lucas cleared his throat. I mean, if she wants it to be. The nursery's almost finished. Lucas. A knock interrupted them. Laura stood in the doorway, wrapped in a robe they brought from the hospital. She looked pale but determined. Should you be up? Lucas was already moving to help her to a chair. I'm tired of lying down, she settled carefully, one hand supporting her belly. And we need to talk. About Mom. About everything. Helena started to rise. I should give you privacy. Say. Laura caught her hand. Your family, too. The word hung in the air, weighted with meaning. Lucas moved to the window, his back rigid with tension. "I remember that day," Laura said softly. "Not clearly. I was only 12. But I remember the sirens, the confusion. And I remember you, Lucas, sitting in the hospital corridor with blood on your hands." "Laura, please." "No, let me finish." Her voice strengthened. "All these years, I thought you abandoned us after Mom died, that you chose your career over family. But you were carrying this guilt alone, weren't you? Punishing yourself for trying to help." Lucas's shoulders hunched. "I made it worse." "You were 15. Laura struggled her feet, moving to her brother with slow determination. "A brilliant, terrified 15-year-old who tried to save our mother when no one else was there. How is that worthy of 20 years of self-hatred? Because I should have known better. Because He broke off as Laura took his hand, placing it on her belly where the baby kicked steadily. "Feel that?" she whispered. "That's your nephew. He's strong and healthy and protected. Not because you're perfect, but because you're here. Because when I needed you, you put aside your own fears to help." Laura's right. Helena moved to join them, drawn by the raw emotion in the air. "I've watched you these past weeks, Lucas. The way you've handled everything. The renovations, the legal battle, the medical crisis. You're not the scared teenager anymore. You're the man who saves people by being exactly who you are." Lucas looked between them, his carefully constructed defenses crumbling. "I don't know how to let it go," he admitted. "The guilt, the fear, it's been part of me for so long." "Then let us help." Laura squeezed his hand. "The same way you've been helping me. Family goes both ways, big brother." A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. Laura wrapped her arms around his waist, and after a moment's hesitation, he hugged her back. Helena watched them, her heart aching with love for these two broken, healing people. She turned to give them privacy, but Lucas caught her wrist. "Stay," he echoed Laura's earlier word. "Please." The baby kicked again, strong enough that they all felt it through the embrace. Laura laughed through tears. "Someone wants attention," she said. "He's been super active since the hospital. Dr. Harper says it's a good sign." "He?" Helena raised an eyebrow. "You know something we don't?" "Just a feeling." Laura rubbed her belly thoughtfully. "A strong, stubborn little boy. Like his uncle." Lucas's breath caught. Helena felt the tremor run through him. Saw the moment another piece of his armor fell away. "I have something to show you both," he said suddenly. "In the nursery." They followed him upstairs, Laura moving carefully with their support. The nursery door was closed, though Helena could smell fresh paint and new carpet through the gap. "I've been working on it at night," Lucas explained, suddenly looking uncertain. "When I couldn't sleep, if you don't like it." He opened the door and Laura gasped. The room had been transformed. Soft gray walls held constellations painted in luminescent paint, stars that would glow in the darkness. The original mural section with Lucas's teenage message had been preserved and framed, surrounded by new words in his adult handwriting. Asterisk for my nephew. Love, Uncle Lucas. Asterisk. But it was the ceiling that drew their eyes. There, painted with painstaking detail, was their mother's original design. Angels watching over a field of stars, each one seeming to dance in the morning light. "Oh, Lucas," Laura's voice broke. "It's perfect. I found her sketches in the attic." His voice was rough. "Thought, maybe it was time to finish what she started. To let her watch over this baby the way she would have wanted." Helena touched one of the stars, feeling the slight texture of the paint. "You did this yourself?" "Couldn't sleep anyway," he shrugged, but his eyes were suspiciously bright. "The contractors thought I was crazy, working in here at 3 a.m., but it felt right. It is right." Laura moved to the antique rocking chair, their mother's, Helena realized, carefully restored. "Everything about this is right." The baby kicked again, and Laura laughed. "I think he agrees." Lucas knelt beside the chair, placing his hand on her belly with new confidence. "Hey, kiddo, your grandma helped with your room, you know? Those are angels up there." Helena watched them, these siblings finally healing their old wounds, and felt tears slip down her cheeks. Lucas looked up, catching her expression. "Helena," concern filled his voice. "I'm fine. She wiped her eyes, smiling. Just happy. You both deserve this. Deserve to be whole again. We all do. Laura's voice was soft but certain. Including you, Helena. You've put your life on hold to help us. Carried our burdens. Maybe it's time you let yourself be happy too. The look Lucas gave her then, full of longing and fear and hope, nearly stopped her heart. Laura, she started. Laura's tone was gentle but firm. Don't deflect, don't run. I've watched you both dance around this for weeks. For years, really. Life's too short for that kind of fear. The baby kicked again, punctuating her words. Lucas stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Helena's face. She's right, Lucas said quietly. About everything. Helena's heart thundered in her chest. Lucas. 20 years ago, I let fear drive me away from everyone I loved. I'm tired being afraid. He moved toward her with the same careful determination Laura had shown earlier. Behind him, the morning sun caught the painted stars, making them shimmer like promises. I'm not that scared teenager anymore either, Helena whispered. The one who let you push her away. His smile was tentative but real. Because I'm done pushing. The baby kicked one more time, making Laura laugh. Oh, go on and kiss her already. Your nephew is clearly Team Helena. And finally, after 20 years of waiting, they did. The day the divorce papers arrived, Laura was sitting in her mother's restored rocking chair, watching late summer rain paint patterns on the nursery windows. At 32 weeks pregnant, her world had narrowed to this peaceful room where painted stars kept vigil and her mother's angels danced overhead. Helena appeared in the doorway, holding a thick manila envelope, special delivery from Olivia. Laura traced her fingers over her rounded belly, feeling her son's familiar movements. Is it done? Almost. Helena sat on the window seat, breaking the seal. Once you sign these, Marcos just needs a countersign. Given the terms of the settlement, his lawyers will make sure he does. I never thought it would end like this. Laura accepted the papers, the weight of them surprisingly light given how they would change her life. When I married him, I thought... I know, Helena's voice was gentle, but endings are just beginnings in disguise. As if agreeing, the baby kicked sharply. Laura smiled, then froze as a different sensation washed over her. Laura? Helena was instantly alert. What's wrong? Nothing. Just... She pressed a hand to her side. Braxton Hicks, probably. Dr. Harper said they might start. Should I get Ethan? He's on an important call. Laura tried to sound casual, but another wave of discomfort made her wince. Really, I'm fine. Helena's skeptical look was interrupted by the doorbell. They exchanged glances. No one was expected, and Ethan's security system hadn't announced a car at the gate. Stay here, Helena ordered, already moving. I'll check. But Laura was struggling to her feet before Helena could stop her. Something about the timing felt wrong, sending warning signals through her nerves. They reached the top of the stairs just as Ethan emerged from his office. Below, through the frosted glass panels flanking the front door, they could see a familiar silhouette. Daniel. Ethan's voice was cold. How did he get past security? The old code still worked. Daniel called through the door, his voice muffled but clear. You really should update your systems more often, Ethan. Helena was already moving down the stairs, but Ethan caught her arm. Wait, something's not right. What's not right, Daniel continued, is my wife hiding from me while her brother and my wife's supposed best friend poison her against me. Ex-wife. Laura said clearly, one hand braced on the banister. The papers just arrived, Daniel. It's over. Nothing's over until I say it is. The doorknob rattled. Let me in, Emily. We need to talk. Another wave of discomfort hit, stronger this time. Emily gripped the railing tighter, trying to breathe through it. Ethan noticed immediately. Helena, get her back to the nursery and call Dr. Harper. I'll handle this. Handle what? Daniel's laugh was ugly. Going to punch me again, Dr. Failure? Maybe kill me like you killed your mother? The words hit like physical blows. Ethan went rigid, but Emily's gasp of pain drew his attention instantly back to her. That wasn't a Braxton Hicks, Helena said quietly, supporting Emily's arm. How long between contractions? I'm only 32 weeks, Emily protested weakly. It's too early. The front door shuddered under a heavy impact. Through the glass, they could see Daniel's distorted shape, and behind him, another figure. Brought company this time, Daniel called. Olivia's father is very interested in how you've been treating his little girl, Ethan. Should we discuss it out here? Or are you going to be civilized and let us in? Richard Bennett. Helena's voice shook slightly. Olivia's father. My ex. The one who you falsely accuse of emotional abuse. The new voice was smooth, cultured, dangerous. Who you tried to destroy with lies. Yes, Helena. We have quite a lot to discuss. Emily doubled over with another contraction. This one strong enough to make her cry out. The sound echoed through the foyer. Emily? Daniel's voice changed, showing the first hint of genuine concern. What's wrong with her? She's in labor, Ethan said clearly, because you're causing her stress. Again, leave now or I'm calling the police. Already done. Helena held up her phone. 3 minutes out, and Dr. Harper is on her way. You're lying. But uncertainty had crept into Daniel's voice. Check the security cameras, Richard Bennett suggested smoothly. Oh, wait. I took care of those, along with the gate controls and the alarm system. Amazing what money can buy these days. Ethan was already moving his phone out. Security breach at the main house. Full response needed. Authorization code. The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Emily's frightened breath seemed too loud. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky like a warning. Power grid's down too, Richard announced, satisfaction clear in his voice. Wonderful thing about small towns. Infrastructure is so vulnerable. The backup generator, Helena started, won't help your phones. Richard's voice grew closer to the door. No signal for the next hour, at least. Plenty of time for a family discussion. Ethan reached both women, guiding them toward the stairs. My office. The landline. Disabled. Richard sounded almost bored. Really, Ethan, for a successful businessman, your security is embarrassingly outdated. Another contraction hit Emily, dropping her to her knees on the stairs. In the dim light filtering through the windows, her face was pale with pain. The baby, she gasped. Something's wrong. The words galvanized Ethan. Gone was the hesitation, the guilt, the careful distance. In its place was the doctor he'd trained to be, the protector he'd always been beneath his walls. Helena, get her to my room. Emergency supplies are in the closet. I'll hold them off. Like hell you will. Helena's voice was steel. We do this together. How touching. Richard's laugh was cold. The failure of a doctor and the lying little girl who never learned her place. Quite a team. The door shuttered again under what had to be a battering ram. Glass cracked in spider-webbing patterns. Emily needs both of us, Helena insisted. Your medical training might. Growing up with 3 brothers taught me a few things about fighting, Ethan interrupted. No one's fighting. Emily managed between contractions. Please. The baby. Lightning flashed, illuminating the scene in stark relief. Emily clutching the banister, face contorted in pain. Helena supporting her while watching the door with fierce protectiveness. Ethan standing between his family and danger, all his carefully constructed walls finally completely gone. Get her upstairs, he said quietly. Barricade the door, if they get through here. When we get through, Richard corrected. The door frame splintered ominously. If they get through, Ethan continued, there's a panic room off my office. Mom insisted on it. When the house was built, the code is December 15th, 1999. Helena's breath caught. The day you kissed me. The day I should have fought for what mattered. Ethan's voice was steady now, certain. I won't make that mistake again. The door gave way with a crash of breaking glass and splintering wood. Through the gap, they could see Daniel wielding what looked like a firefighter's ram, with Richard Bennett's elegant figure behind him. Last chance, Richard called. Come down and talk civilly, or... Emily's scream cut through whatever threat he was about to make. This contraction was different. They all knew it. Her water broke, Helena reported, fear making her voice shake. Ethan, he was already moving, putting himself between the broken door and the stairs. Both of you. Now. Ethan, please, Helena started, but Emily's next cry made a decision for them. As they helped Emily up the stairs, they heard Ethan's voice, not angry or frightened, but filled with a calm authority none of them had heard before. You want to talk? He said clearly. Fine. Let's talk about how you're both going to spend the next decade in prison. About how every business contact I have will know what you did here. About how you're threatening a pregnant woman and endangering my nephew's life. Grave words, Richard sneered. But we both know you're a coward who let his mother die, who ran away from his calling. Who? I was a boy who tried to save his mother. Ethan's voice was thunder. A man who spent 20 years punishing himself for being human. But right now, I'm just a brother and uncle who's really tired of bullies hurting the people I love. The sound of the first punch echoed through the house like a thunderclap, followed by the crash of breaking furniture and Daniel's startled cry. Helena hesitated at the top of the stairs, tore between helping Ethan and protecting Emily. Go! Emily gasped between contractions. Help him. I can make it to the panic room. Emily, my son needs his uncle alive to teach him about stars. Emily managed a pained smile. Go protect our family. Helena kissed her forehead quickly. Lock yourself in. We'll come for you once it's safe. As she raced back down the stairs, Emily heard Richard Bennett's cultured voice turn to a howl of pain. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. Emily made it to the panic room just as another contraction hit, the strongest yet. As she punched in the code with trembling fingers, she sent up a prayer to the angels watching over the nursery. Please, she thought desperately, asterisk keep them safe. Keep us all safe, asterisk. The baby kicked hard, as if making his own declaration of war. And somehow, despite the pain and fear, Emily smiled. After all, he was a Reeves. And Reeves' men, as her brother was finally proving downstairs, knew how to fight for what mattered. Dr. Harper would later say it was a miracle everything aligned perfectly. The police arriving just as Richard Bennett had Ethan pinned against a wall. Helena executing a flawless self-defense move that left Daniel writhing on the floor. And the emergency medical team making it through the storm in record time. But the real miracle, according to Helena, happened in the panic room. She found Emily there after the police had subdued both intruders. After Ethan had rattled off vital signs and medical history to the paramedics with perfect clarity. The door was locked, but Helena could hear Emily's controlled breathing through the intercom. It's safe, she called, but we need to get you to the hospital. Now. Emily's voice was strained but determined. Baby's coming fast. Helena's blood ran cold. Emily unlocked the door. Trying, a gasp of pain. Contraction. Ethan appeared beside Helena, his shirt torn, a bruise darkening his jaw. Emily, talk to me. How far apart are the contractions? Maybe 1 minute. Less. Another cry of pain. Ethan, I can feel the head. Dr. Harper's 3 minutes out, Helena reported, checking her phone. Ambulance right behind her. Too late. Ethan's medical training took over completely. Emily, listen carefully. Do not push yet. Helena, get my medical bag from the office and find clean towels. The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. The door finally unlocked between contractions, revealing Emily on the floor, face glazed with sweat, but eyes clear and focused. Ethan knelt beside his sister, all traces of hesitation gone. I'm here. We're all here. You're not alone. Like Mom, Emily gasped. In the hospital. She wasn't alone either, was she? Ethan's hand stilled for just a moment. No, she knew she was loved. And so do you? The next contraction hit before Emily could respond. Ethan moved with confident efficiency, checking the baby's position while Helena supported Emily's back. On the next contraction, Ethan instructed, Push. Your son's ready to meet us. Emily grabbed Helena's hand. Promise. Promise you'll both be there for him. No matter what. We promise, Helena said firmly, meeting Ethan's eyes over Emily's head. We're family. The next few minutes were intense focus, punctuated by Emily's cries and Ethan's steady instructions. Then, just as lightning cracked outside and power returned to the house, a new cry filled the air. Strong, indignant, alive. "Hello, Nicholas," Emily whispered as Ethan placed a wrap bundle on her chest. "Name for the stars your uncle painted." Dr. Harper arrived to find them exactly like that. Emily cradling her son, Helena supporting them both, and Ethan checking vital signs with tears running unchecked down his face. "Well," the older doctor said after examining both mother and baby, "I'd say you haven't lost your touch, Ethan. Perfect delivery under less than perfect circumstances." Ethan looked up from where he was recording Nicholas's statistics. "I had help." "You certainly did." Dr. Harper's eyes twinkled. "The police want statement from all of you, but I've bought you an hour. Shall we move this party somewhere more comfortable?" They relocated Emily's room, where the morning sun was just beginning to paint the sky in shades of pearl and gold. Nicholas nursed contentedly while Emily gave her statement to a sympathetic detective. "Mr. Bennett and Mr. Carter are both in custody," the detective reported. "Given the evidence and security footage Mr. Bennett failed to completely disable, they'll be facing serious charges." "Good." Helena sat beside Emily's bed, unable to take her eyes off Nicholas's perfect face. "They can't hurt this family anymore." "Family?" Emily's voice was tired but happy. "Look at him, Ethan. Really look. He has Mom's eyes." Ethan, who had been reviewing medical charts in the corner, moved closer. In the morning light, his bruises stood out starkly against the skin, but his smile was pure joy. "He does," he agreed softly. "And your strength." "Our strength," Emily corrected. "The strength that got you through medical school, that helped Helena survive Richard, that brought us all here together." She shifted Nicholas slightly. "Want to hold your nephew?" Ethan hesitated only a moment before accepting the bundle. Nicholas blinked up at him with unfocused eyes, one tiny hand escaping the blanket to grab his uncle's finger. "Hey, kid," Ethan whispered. "Welcome to the family. It's a little complicated sometimes, a little broken, but full of love," Helena finished, moving to stand beside him. "And getting stronger every day." The sun crested the horizon fully, sending light streaming through the windows. It caught the tears on Ethan's cheeks, transforming them into diamonds. "I've been thinking," he said, still watching Nicholas, "about the future, about what matters." "Oh!" Helena's heart skipped at his tone. "The medical board meets next month. I'd like to reinstate my license." He looked up, meeting first Emily's eyes, then Helena's. "Part-time, children's medicine." Emily gasped softly. "Ethan, Nicholas made me remember why I wanted to be a doctor in the first place." He gently stroked his nephew's cheek. "To help, to heal, to protect. Mom would have wanted that." "She would have been so proud," Helena whispered, touching his arm. "Of all of us." Ethan caught her hand, twining their fingers together. "I'm done running from happiness," he said quietly. "Done letting fear rule my choices. If you'll have me, if—" Helena laughed through her own tears. 20 years, Ethan. My heart has been yours for 20 years. Nicholas chose that moment to cry, a demanding wail that clearly stated his opinion on sharing attention. They all laughed as Ethan carefully returned him to Emily's arms. "Drama queen," Emily teased, settling her son. "Just like your uncle." Speaking of drama, Helena's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Ethan, don't you have something else to tell your sister?" He shot her a mock glare. "I was getting to that." "Getting to what?" Emily looked between them. "What else happened while I was having a baby?" "Well," Ethan cleared his throat. "I may have asked Helena to marry me between punches in the foyer." "You what?" Emily sat up straighter, jostling Nicholas, who protested with another cry. "Not my most romantic moment," Ethan admitted. "But when you're fighting your sister's ex-husband and your girlfriend's abusive ex, certain things become very clear." "And," Emily demanded. I said yes. Helena's smile was radiant. Also between punches in the foyer, Emily looked at her son. "You hear that, Nicholas? Your aunt and Uncle finally got their act together. Only took them 20 years and a dramatic fight scene. Plus a birth in a panic room, Helena added. And some truly terrible men making us realize what really matters, Ethan finished. Nicholas yawned, apparently unimpressed with the adult's drama. Emily smoothed his dark hair, her expression thoughtful. You know what this means? She said after a moment. The nursery needs updating. Can't have my son growing up without a proper reminder of how his family came together. What did you have in mind? Ethan asked. Add to your message on the wall. The whole story. How love wins. How family heals. How sometimes the longest roads lead us exactly where we need to be. Helena squeezed Ethan's hand. I like that idea. A reminder that happy endings are possible, even after pain. Not an ending, Ethan corrected softly. A beginning. Through the window, they could see the storm clouds clearing, revealing a sky as bright and full of promises as Nicholas's future. In the distance, paint cans and brushes waited in a nursery where angels dance among stars. And in this room, surrounded by love and hope and possibility, a new chapter began. A family that had been broken began to heal. A beginning, Emily agreed, watching her son drift asleep. For all of us. Sarah leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, feeling his arm slip around her waist. After 20 years of waiting, of fear and loss and longing, they had found their way home, not to a perfect ending, but to a perfect moment, one full of promise, of second chances, of love strong enough to weather any storm. Above them, in a nursery painted with stars, their mother's angels kept watch. And somewhere, Sarah was certain, she was smiling. After all, what better guardian could a family have than love itself? Finally set free to shine as bright as any star in the summer sky. If you had to carry guilt for 20 years like Ethan, what moment from your past would you choose to forgive today to allow love to enter your life? Sometimes, our greatest prisons are built by ourselves. Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.